So I'm going to begin on a personal note. And since my better half and my mother are not here, nobody can stop me. So I'm going to start here. For those of you who know me, you're well aware of this fact. And for those of you who've never met me or seen me before, I am a transgender man. And I'm going to begin there because I'm going to begin by talking about my father. My father was born in West Virginia, sometime around 1950. West Virginia in 1950, I'm sure it was a lovely place. Never been there, don't plan to. Sure, it's a very nice place full of very nice people. But 1950, the value system would have been very different than the world we're living in today. And when I was, my dad would have been about in his 30s, about my age when I was born. And about 16 years later, I came out to my dad as a lesbian at that time. Remember the transgender man part? So just checking, we got to fact check if you understand how this transgender thing works. Okay, so I came out as a lesbian when I was about 16. And my dad didn't handle it very well, to say the least. And we've been estranged ever since. I have not seen my father in 15 years, maybe 16. I've not physically seen him. And so I began my transition about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago now. And I hadn't told him because I don't speak to him. And then it got awkward because my voice changed and I wasn't sure how I was going to call him and tell him because he's going to be like, who's this guy? Things just got awkward really quick. And my sister, who's 13 years older than me, and the joy of her life was harassing me, was not going to make my life any easier by helping me out and calling him to tell him. She wanted me to do it myself. So we're going to fast forward to just about a year ago, when my father and I have spoken periodically from time to time, and I would say he was a great dad when I was a kid, until I was about maybe 8 or 9. My dad had really serious addiction issues. He was an alcoholic, and he was a fairly violent alcoholic, and he was a great dad. He played with me. He loved me. Some of my greatest memories as a child were with my dad. Some of my worst were also with my dad, but some of my best were also with him. And I never understood why he couldn't just keep it together. Why he couldn't just be a little kinder. Why he couldn't have just gotten it together when I came out and just figured it out. Now at 32, having the opportunity, those 2 years are important, especially when you look like you're 18, those 2 years are very important. So now at 32, having the opportunity to be a step-parent, I get it. I have some perspective. And if I were not a better man, I might be just like my dad. In fact, I look just like my dad, which is a shock to all of us, I'm sure. Most especially to my father. So moving along in this story, he called me, actually, which hadn't happened in a long time. And since you can't change your voice when you answer the phone, at least not when you have now this low a voice, you can't change it to any reasonable octave, I stammered through, and he didn't care. Because we're both different people. And perspective gives you that gift. Sometime in this 15-year span, I became grateful for my dad. As I began to transition and my face began to change and my voice began to change, and suddenly in that mirror was my dad looking back at me, I thought, well, we're going to have to make peace with this. Otherwise, it's going to be real awkward every morning when I wake up to brush my teeth. And as I began parenting young men, and as I began parenting myself, as somebody in their 30s who was trying to figure out what it means to be a man, all of this meant I was going to have to find some gratitude. I was going to have to find some gratitude, some appreciation, some understanding for the kind of pressure that my father was under, for the kind of value system that he had growing up, for the things that he was taught when he was a child, for the things that he learned about being a man, and the things that he learned about what women were supposed to be, without judging about whether or not that was right or wrong. Gratitude can give you relationships back. It can give you time back. It can give you love back. It can give you perspective and joy, and it can give you some grief. Because in the process of this, of course, I had to understand that there was only one of us who really imposed this estrangement, and it was me. I said no for 15 years because I was angry that he couldn't have done better. Now, I'm not saying he's a saint, but me, myself, had I had the humility to go into that sense of gratitude just a little earlier, and granted you can't, right? You can't rush the process. When you get there is when you get there, but it's hard not to think if I had gotten there just a little quicker, I could have had a much different relationship with my father. Now, I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I'm not going to say we're buddy-buddy and I talk to him every day. I don't. In fact, I sent him pictures for the very first time a couple of months ago. First time he's ever seen me, and I have yet to see him in 15 years. I can't tell you what he looks like. But that's okay, because what needed to be healed wasn't out there. It was in here. So now that I've aired out my Jerry Springer past, it's just a personal story to bring home this concept that the work that we do is an inside job. There's nothing outside of us that can force us to do the work that we have to do any faster than when those revelations come. There are, however, tools that we can utilize to help us create the space for those revelations to take hold. And this is where Inner Light comes in, or churches like it, or spiritual communities or whatever, if you're allergic to the word church or God. Other places that uplift you, empower you, right? They give you the tools to create a space within your heart that allows for things like gratitude to take hold. I don't know about you, but my first emotion is anger. Always anger. I'm a super good angry person. It's my first line of defense always is anger. And it takes an incredible amount of discipline to temper that anger. That's kind of a funny word to use for that, but we're just, I'm sure Freud is flipping in his grave. So it takes an incredible amount of discipline to be able to recognize that sometimes your first instinct isn't the correct instinct, problem number one. And number two is to be able to have a sense of perspective within the condition that you find yourself within. So I don't have this up here because I'm expecting a phone call. I have this up here because I went through our 4-year program, our 4-year practitioner program. Thank God Valerie Hayes or Reverend Deborah are not down here because both would be angry at me for not being able to remember these 5 steps. I told you I wasn't credentialed when we started, okay? So you cannot be upset with me. So what Inner Light practices is something called affirmative prayer. Affirmative prayer has 5 legitimate steps, which are the ones I can't remember, which I'm going to read to you. And there's also a spirit behind the law, right? So there's these 5 steps, and then there's a way that we interact with them. So I'm going to tell you what these 5 steps are. And the first step is recognition, right? And recognition is understanding that God is all there is. Say it however you want. You translate. Unification, that you are part of that God energy, that life energy, that love energy, whatever. Realization. Realization is about the step of claiming. It's about the step of saying what is and that you're going to stand in that knowing, okay? And then you have thanksgiving, gratitude, right? We're doing that all here together. And the last is release, is letting go, which is what the reading was alluding to. Why am I telling you this? Because sometimes we get stuck on words. Sometimes we get stuck on concepts. This thing is driving me crazy. Sorry. I'm breaking the 4th wall. This is driving me nuts. Sometimes we get stuck on the words. We think of church, or we think of God, or we think of prayer, and we think that has nothing to do with me because everything in my life conditions has said that I'm not allowed to participate in those things. But really what affirmative prayer is just a mental exercise into bringing yourself into this place of gratitude. Yes, gratitude is one of those steps, but have you ever seen those toy balls that are they're different colored little sticks or whatever, and then you expand it, and it turns into a ball, and then you push it back down, and it turns into this spiky thing. So, I did a terrible job of explaining that, and I will not blame you if you don't understand what I'm talking about. But our spiritual qualities are like that. They're all interconnected, and they're more 3D than we think. So there's not something at the center, and then all of these things connect to it. They're all connecting to each other, and at any time, anything could be in the center, right? And everything is kind of spokes off of that. And affirmative prayer is bringing you into this place of gratitude. It's bringing you into this place of perspective. When you have somebody like me, who learned from Rev D, who never writes things down and just gets up here and talks off the top of their head, what ends up happening is that if you follow your train of thought, you end up bumping into places you didn't know were there. This is what prayer does. What prayer does is it brings you down these roads where there are some, there's the exit of forgiveness, and there's the exit of gratitude, and there's the exit of trust, and so you can kind of have an understanding of which direction you're going in, but while you're praying, what it is it's recalibrating your mind to experience what you are experiencing differently. It doesn't change. What you are experiencing does not change. All of the circumstances are still exactly the same as they were as 2 minutes before you started praying. 25 for some of us. It takes us a long time to travel down the road. But the circumstances stay the same. What changes is you. Gratitude is this mechanism that changes you within the circumstance. So a lot of us get caught up in praying for something specific. I am sick. I want God to heal me like this. I want to come out of this thing like this. But that's not how it works. Really what's happening is that you're saying, I want to be healthy. And it does not matter how. And sometimes our concept of health is limited to our understanding of health, which if history is any indication, our understandings change all the time. Gratitude is a prayer. It's recalibrating your understanding of where you are. It's changing your perspective so that you can be different, so that you can experience what you're going through differently, which then doesn't put the experience on your back in such a way that it weighs you down, that you can't get out from underneath of it. Gratitude allows you to walk beside your circumstances, not underneath of them, not on top of them. Life is not meant to be dominated, not meant to be conquered. I am a sports fan, fanatic. I encapsulate fanatic when it comes to sports. And here's a story you don't care about. Last night, at least I'm honest, Ronda Rousey was knocked out last night, which was a massive upset. If you know anything about combat sports, which you probably shouldn't know anything about combat sports, but if you do, major upset. And I was thinking about this because her attitude sucked, really. Going into the fight, her attitude just sucked. I mean, she was really emotional, and she wouldn't touch gloves before they started fighting, like just in a bad mood. And I remember thinking, you're going to lose this fight because you're in a bad mood. Like, you're about to lose because you're in a bad mood. Because there's this sense of being able to dominate, this sense of being able to control, this sense of being able to impose somebody's will on the outcome of something. But life doesn't work like that. Life can be partnered with. Life can be enjoyed. But life can't be controlled. Horrible things are going to happen. And when we have this sense that we're not partnered with life, it's easy to blame life for the circumstances we find ourselves in. But we're partnered. I've said this before, I don't know what God is. I've not made up my mind on what I believe God is. But I do believe that one of the ways that we can see God is in the interconnectedness of our lives. And my generation, more than any other generation, has really made this manifest through the internet and these different ways that now we really are beginning to have a global citizenry. And when you see inexplicable things happen, there is no justification for them. There's no defense of it. There's no way to rationalize those things. But if you can manage to recalibrate your heart, if you can manage to recalibrate your mind in such a way that allows you to understand that you are connected to all life, not just the life you like, all life, then we have to be cognizant of the illnesses that we have perpetuated. Now, this gets tricky because people don't want to be connected to life they don't like. But it doesn't make us any less responsible. And for many of us, we won't be able to make a tangible change. Maybe not many of us. For some of us, we won't be able to make a tangible change. We can't necessarily touch that circumstance that's going on. But what we can do is we can clean up our minds. I sometimes see when things happen, you see this judgment that takes place around comparing. If you're praying for Paris, that means you don't care about Kenya or Beirut because you didn't change your hashtag or whatever. However, you didn't change your profile picture. Whatever, I don't know what happened. But somehow doing this means you didn't do that. And that's not to say you were aware that these other things were happening at more or less the same time. But we've got to release the judgment. We've got to be willing to inform without being condescending. We've got to be willing to empower, to bring people in without being condescending about what you didn't know when you walked in the room. This gets real hard in some situations, especially when we step back and we look at social justice work. And you come up against these ideas of privilege or entitlement, and it can be like ramming your head against a brick wall. It really can. I love you, and it's so hard sometimes to have these conversations. But we've got to find a way to lower the walls, to be able to have some appreciation for the diversity of experiences, for the diversity of ideologies, the diversity of understandings, the diversity of life experiences that create conditions for people to have the understandings that they have without being condescending and judgmental, so that those people can learn, can evolve, can change. And I think sometimes where we get caught up is that we feel like it's our personal mission. And that really can be like ramming your head against a brick wall. It's a collective responsibility to raise the consciousness. Not just the woo-woo meditative consciousness. I mean the real, legitimate, ground level understandings of the intricacies of these systems that we participate in. Are you with me? Okay. Gratitude is part of this. Spiritual understanding is part of this. And I think one of the, I don't know if I'm willing to say that, a terrible injustice is that we've locked people out of spiritual understandings. We've allowed religion to supersede spirituality in such a way that the doctrines of those religions have excluded some people who probably need those understandings most. We're going to have to move past that. And I think if you look at cultural trends, especially in the United States, there's a very clear indication that people don't want that anymore. But gratitude is free. Prayer is free. You call it whatever you want. You can call it meditation, you can call it prayer, you can call it weight training, you can call it whatever you want. It's anything that allows you to shift your perspective in such a way that allows you to understand your conditions differently, not changes your conditions to meet your understanding. You get that? You cannot manipulate your conditions to meet your understanding. If that worked, relationships would be very different. At least mine would. I don't know about yours, but whoa, mine would be real different. People come in with their own work to do. I think about this with the little guys in my life. I can't control what's theirs to do. I can't control what's on their plate. All I can do is provide them with the tools they need to be as successful as they can be. And we seem to kind of get this when it comes to kids. But we don't do this in our own lives. All you can do is give yourself the tools to be as successful as you can be, regardless of the circumstances or conditions. We live in a totally different time. I know that I'm young, but today is different than when I was a kid. If only in the fact that I am speaking to you on a pulpit as an openly transgender man who made no bones about the fact that I was transgender when I walked up here. That's a different world. Because we have this opportunity to propel ideas through space and time at such a greater rate and at such a farther distance than any time ever before, things are only going to get faster. Changes are only going to happen faster, for the better or for the worse. Because there's no differentiation between good ideas and bad ideas. Lord, Twitter's a indication of that. Bad ideas go just as fast as good ones do. You have to be willing to put good ideas out there. And that means you have to be willing to sweep your own front porch. It means you have to be willing to do your own work. Where are you reacting to a circumstance? And that gut reaction is what goes out versus taking the time to be reflective, taking the time to be accountable. Accountability, taking the time to be accountable, to take that personal inventory, then to put a little gratitude on top of that, allow your perspective to be shifted, to be recalibrated, and then you go out and do whatever you want. But you got to take the time to do that. Has anybody, what was that documentary with the dude just ate McDonald's for like 30 days? Super Size Me. You remember what happened at the end of 30 days? Very sick, yeah, very sick. Your mind is like this. You have to be cognizant of the environment that your mind is living in. What are the things that we're putting in, that we're intaking? What are the things that we're putting out? What are the relationships in our lives that we allow ourselves to stay in because we're too afraid to get out of them? What are the circumstances that we are 100% sure we're going to be able to change, so therefore, we don't approach them differently? We're just positive we're going to be able to change whatever it is that we find ourselves in, right? So we're not going to do anything differently. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing because I know if I just impose my will just a little bit more, this thing is going to change. But it can't possibly be me. It's not me. It's you. You have to give yourself the best possible chance at living a good life if you really intend on living a good life. And in so doing, you provide those around you with an opportunity to live a good life with you in it. I don't know about you, but usually I'm pretty sure I'm not the one who's wrong. Right? I am I'm good. I'm right all the time. 98% of the time. I acquiesce 2%. It can't always be somebody else. Like at some point, it's you. Like, it's just you. I know it sucks. I know you don't want to admit it. It's you. And we have to be accountable for that. And gratitude brings with it humility. I cannot state enough how much humility has been a guiding principle for me. You're just not all that. I mean, I just keep your self-confidence up, but it's like you're not all that, you know, like, I mean, you're that, but you're not like all that, right? Like you're good, but you know what I'm saying? It's like you have to be a little humble about it. And this is that part of imposing your will. You have to be humble if you're going to learn. You have to be humble if you're going to change. You have to be humble if you're going to be able to be grateful. You have to be willing to understand that life can only be partnered with, not dominated, not conquered, not controlled. And that requires some humility. Gratitude and humility, for me, do what you want with this, but gratitude and humility, for me, go hand in hand. I don't have the answers for what this world needs. I don't. But you know what I'm sure won't hurt? Is a little bit of gratitude. And I really believe that sometimes it's just that simple. Everybody's life matters. Everybody's life matters. And in a lot of countries on this planet, mine would not. And in this country, some still don't. We have a lot of work to do. It is going to take a great deal of humility. It is going to take a great deal of gratitude. And it is going to take a great deal of personal accountability. Prayer is one tool. I'm not telling you it's the right one. I'm just telling you it's there. And if it were me, and somebody gave me a tool that could make my life better today, I would gladly take it. And I hope that while you're sitting here in Sunday service, that you recognize that when you leave this building, there are relationships that you're going to have to be accountable to. There are duties and jobs and children and 1,000 other things that need your attention. This isn't something you have to buy. It's not something that you have to do for 10 hours a day. This is just something small that can make a massive impact. Gratitude will give you time back. It will give you love back. It will give you relationships back. It will give you a road back to you. And I hope you'll take that. Let us pray.